Good evening, night travelers. Wherever you're listening from, under a street lamp, under a ceiling fan that clicks like it's judging you, or under the soft threat of tomorrow's alarm, welcome. Tonight, you don't have to be impressive. You don't have to be efficient. You just have to be here, breathing, letting history turn into a room you can rest in. You picture it in the present tense, because your mind deserves something gentle and immediate. A river breathing out mist, reeds bowing and rising in slow motion, and a Saxon village tucked into the curve of water like a secret kept warm in wool. Thatched roofs catch the last dim gold of evening. Smoke lifts in calm ribbons. Somewhere, mead is warming into sweetness. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and grain turned kindly. And yes, one reality check before you float too far. You probably won't survive this in the way your ego wants. No heroic speeches. No triumphant soundtrack. Tonight you survive the older way by softening, by noticing, by letting ordinary details win. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. The story begins at the river's edge, where dusk settles like a hand on a shoulder. You trudge along a narrow track pressed into the grass by seasons of feet. The ground is damp and forgiving, and your steps land without argument. Beside you, the river runs wide and unbothered, carrying reflections that can't decide whether they belong to water or sky. Mist gathers on your sleeves and lashes, cool and clean, as if the world is rinsing you of whatever you dragged in from your day. Ahead, the village arrives in layers. A smear of smoke against dark trees, then fences and stacked firewood, then the rounded weight of thatch roofs. There's no grand gate to announce importance. Instead, there is a simple shift in the ground where trodden soil becomes more deliberate, footprints overlapping into a shared pattern. You step into it and feel instantly that this place is built on routine more than drama. Near a doorway, someone bends over a woven basket, hands moving with steady practice. Lift, sort, fold. Pale will catches the last firelight and looks briefly luminous, as if it remembers clouds. A wooden comb with big teeth leans against a bench, ready to rake fleece into order. Nothing here is decorative by accident. Everything has a job, and the job is usually warmth. You slow down. Your shoulders drop, as if they finally remember they were allowed to do that. The longhouse sits near the village center, longer and lower than the other buildings, crouched like a patient animal. Its doorway glows. Firelight spills out, not bright enough to shout, but bright enough to invite. The scent reaching you is unmistakable now. Fermented grain turned sweet, herbs and smoke braided into it. The comfort scent of mead made by hands that understand time is an ingredient. As you drift closer, details sharpen the way your eyes adjust in a dark room. Bundles of fleece sit under rough coverings to keep dew off. Tools hang where they can be found in half light, because losing a tool is not acute inconvenience here. It is tomorrow's problem growing teeth. Clothing is thick, seams built to last, colors muted by plant dyes and honest use. You do not see luxury. You see intention, and somehow that feels richer. You reach the edge of the longhouse glow and feel your body respond before your thoughts do. Your breathing deepens. Your jaw loosens. The frantic part of your mind that keeps trying to schedule and solve finds nothing to grip. Evening here has a shape. Work winds down into ritual. The river keeps moving, but the village begins to settle, as if it has learned how to lower itself gently into night. And then you notice the riddles, not spoken aloud yet, but threaded through the world like sleepy knots. A woven fence repeats a pattern and then breaks it, daring your eyes to catch the change. A thatch edge is trimmed in a rhythm that feels like counting without needing numbers. A carved mark on a post could be a tally, a charm, a warning, or a joke meant for anyone sharp enough to read it. Even the river's surface offers questions without urgency. What moves without feet? What speaks without a mouth? What shines without flame? You don't rush to answer. You let the questions settle inside you like warm stones, heavy in a comforting way. You let your mind become a little slower, a little softer. The way will become smoother the more patiently it is worked. Mist follows you right up to the threshold, and then it thins as if respecting boundaries. Firelight holds out a calm hand. You take the last step of the path and let the evening receive you, quiet, ordinary, and strangely tender, as if a blanket is being drawn up to your chin. You don't announce yourself. You simply enter the longhouse the way you enter sleep, without trying to control it, without making it about you, letting the warmth do what warmth has always done. Soften the edges. The air inside is thick in the best possible way. Smoke hangs under the rafters, not choking, just present, like an old story that refuses to leave. Firelight flickers across wooden beams blackened by years of careful burning. The floor is packed earth, clean in a practical sense, brushed and tamped and kept from turning into mud by rules that nobody needs to shout. Everything smells like wood, grain, and bodies that work. Not perfume, not soap advertisement fantasies, just life, real and steady. You move slowly because the space teaches you to. Along the walls, benches and low platforms hold bundles of wool and folded cloth, and the occasional heavy cloak that looks like it could survive a storm with nothing but stubbornness. A few simple objects sit where they're needed. A bucket, a ladle, a stone for grinding, a comb for teasing out fleece. Each item is placed with the quiet logic of someone who has woken up cold and decided never again. At the center, the hearth. It doesn't blaze. It glows, the kind of fire that understands the difference between warmth and spectacle. Above it, a pot hangs from an iron hook, simmering with something grainy and soothing. Your stomach reacts in a way that feels embarrassing, like it's been waiting all day for someone to remember it exists. You inhale, and the scent of mead threads into your chest, sweet fermented, faintly herbal, a promise of loosened muscles and slower thoughts. The mead itself is not a grand ceremony. It's more like a shared agreement that winter will be met with softness whenever possible. Somewhere in the back of the longhouse, you sense the presence of barrels or heavy clay vessels, sealed and waiting, their contents working quietly the way time works. Invisible, patient, inevitable. You imagine honey, or whatever sweetness is available, stirred into water and grain, left to do its slow magic. You picture hands that understand the exact moment to stop fussing and let fermentation take over. The ancient art of making something comforting out of what might otherwise just be calories. A bowl appears near the hearth, not presented dramatically, not offered with any grand speech, just placed within reach, as if the longhouse itself is saying, "You look tired, and tired people need warmth." You wrap your hands around it, feeling the rough texture of clay against your palms. The heat bleeds into you, quiet and immediate. You sip. It's gentle, not sugary, not sharp, just sweet enough to feel like kindness. It tastes of grain and smoke and a hint of wild herbs, the kind that grow in stubborn patches near riverbanks. You swallow and your throat relaxes. Your shoulders drop another fraction. Somewhere deep in your nervous system, a tight knot loosens as if it finally received permission. This is the strange thing about hospitality that isn't performative. It doesn't demand gratitude. It doesn't make you prove you deserve it. It simply arrives as a function of community, like a fire that's kept going because everyone benefits from it. In a world where the cold can kill you, generosity becomes less of a virtue and more of a survival skill dressed up as warmth. You settle on a bench. The wood is worn smooth by countless evenings, countless bodies leaning into the same shared fatigue. You feel the longhouse breathe around you. Small movements, quiet steps, the scrape of a bowl, the soft shifting of old bundles being moved away from sparks. You watch hands more than faces. Hands tell the truth here. Hands repair, stir, fold, and knot. Hands carry the day's work into night without complaint. And the riddles, yes, they're still here, even in the glow. You notice carved marks on a beam above you. Simple lines, angles, maybe runes, maybe just practical tallies. Your mind tries to label them, to convert them into certainty, but the longhouse resists that kind of urgency. Instead, the marks sit there like sleepy questions. What is counted, and why? What is remembered, and what is allowed to disappear? A woven wall hanging catches your eye. Not fancy, but deliberate, strips of dyed wool, muted earth tones, arranged in a pattern that almost repeats and then refuses. It's the kind of pattern that makes your brain lean forward, wanting to solve it, and then lean back, deciding it's okay not to. A riddle for the eyes, a lullaby for logic. You sip again. The warmth spreads through your chest and down your arms. The crackle of the hearth becomes a metronome. The smoke overhead drifts like a slow thought. You begin to understand why sleepy riddles belong here. In a place where life can be harsh, the mind still needs play. Not loud play, not chaotic play, just the gentle game of noticing, of wondering, of letting curiosity soften fear. Outside, the river keeps moving, carrying away daylight. Inside, the longhouse holds you in its steady warmth. You don't need to perform. You don't need to impress anyone with how historically informed you are. You just need to sit, sip, and let this place teach you the oldest lesson it knows. When the night comes, You meet it together with warmth, wool, and questions that don't demand answers. Your eyelids feel heavier, but not in a way that scares you. More like a blanket being placed on your lashes. You breathe in mead-sweet air and breathe out the modern world, a little at a time, until the only thing left is firelight and the soft, steady promise of rest. You eventually drift back out of the longhouse, not because you're pushed, but because the evening has a gentle momentum, and you find yourself carried along by it. The mead warmth stays in your chest like a small, friendly coal. Outside, the air is cooler, sharper, rinsed clean by river mist. The village is quieter now, but not asleep. More like it's speaking in a lower voice so the night can hear. You follow the soft scrape of work continuing near the riverside. It's not dramatic labor, no shouting, no theatrical hammers, just steady movement and the kind of patience that makes modern people itch, because modern people are trained to confuse speed with value. Here, value is what keeps you warm in January. Near a low shelter, bundles of fleece sit piled like pale clouds that have decided to become practical. The wool looks unassuming at first, raw, uneven, faintly dirty, still carrying bits of grass and small burrs. But as you step closer, you see the richness of it. The springy curl of fibers, the density, the quiet promise of insulation. It is warmth in its earliest, messiest form. Hands are at work. Fingers pinch and pull, sorting the fleece by feel, separating the finer fibers from the rougher, plucking out twigs and tangles. The movements are calm, repetitive, almost hypnotic. You watch long enough to feel your own brain slow down to match the rhythm, like your thoughts are being combed as well, teased apart and made less snarled. A wooden comb rests nearby, big teeth, sturdy handle, built for a job that doesn't care about elegance, only effectiveness. The comb is a simple riddle in itself. How do you turn chaos into thread without losing the softness? The answer is patience and pressure, applied in the right direction. There is something quietly comforting about that. You don't fix a snarl by yanking harder. You fix it by working with it. You lift a small handful of fleece just to feel it. It's heavier than you expect, slightly oily with lanolin. That natural wax that makes sheep weatherproof and makes wool resist water better than your average modern hoodie pretending it's performance fabric. The lanolin clings to your fingertips. It smells faintly animal, faintly grassy, faintly alive. Not unpleasant, just honest. You rub the fibers between your fingers and realize how much warmth begins as texture. Wool isn't just a material, it's a strategy. It's a way of surviving damp wind and long cold nights without needing stone walls or perfect insulation. You understand why wool becomes central here, why it's sorted, combed, spun, woven, and guarded like something precious. Because it is precious. It is literally the difference between sleeping and shivering. The river beside you moves in the half-dark, reflecting the sky's last thin light. Mist curls above the surface, drifting in slow sheets. You watch the mist and think, sleepily, that the river is also a kind of wool, soft, shifting, layered, protective. It hides what's beneath without denying it exists. It turns sharp edges into gentler outlines. It wraps the village in quiet, the way a cloak wraps shoulders. You walk along the bank. Footprints press into damp soil and hold their shape. Reeds whisper together, a sound so soft it feels like the world is afraid to wake itself. Somewhere behind you, the longhouse hearth glows through cracks in walls and doorways, and you carry that glow with you even when you can't see it. You reach another small work spot where something round and simple turns slowly. A spindle. The motion is small, controlled. The fiber twists, becomes thread, becomes something that can be wound and kept and turned into cloth. Watching it is like watching time being made visible. Each twist is a moment. Each length of thread is proof that patience adds up into something real. You find your breath sinking with the turning. Inhale, twist. Exhale, wind. The rhythm is more soothing than any productivity app. Your mind tries to drift into analysis. How many hours, how many spindles, how much cloth? But the night gently takes that impulse away. The point is not numbers. The point is continuity. The point is that someone is always turning raw softness into usable warmth, one slow rotation at a time. And because this is a village where riddles live quietly in the corners, you notice how wool itself becomes a question. What is soft but strong? What comes from an animal yet becomes armor against weather? What holds warmth even when damp? You don't need to answer out loud. You simply hold the question and feel its shape. You glance down and see a woven reed basket resting near the work area, the kind used for carrying fleece or tools, or maybe tomorrow's bread. It sits there like a familiar prop in a story you're only beginning to understand. Humble, useful, always returning. Beside it, a small brass oil lamp waits. Unlit for now, but ready to take darkness and turn it into something manageable. You don't know yet how often those objects will matter, but your tired brain tags them as anchors, little continuity points in the drifting narrative of night. You keep walking, and the village continues to reveal itself in quiet layers. Wool and river, mist and firelight, hands at work and minds at rest. The mead warmth still lingers in you, turning your thoughts softer around the edges. You realize that you are being taught, not through lectures, but through the slow demonstration of how to live. Make warmth, share it, and let your mind play gently even when the world is cold. By the time you turn back toward the longhouse glow, your fingers still smell faintly of lanolin, and your heartbeat feels slower, steadier, as if the river has quietly convinced it to stop rushing. You return toward the village center with the feeling that you've been rinsed. The river mist clings to you, but it's not the clammy kind that makes you miserable. It's the clean kind that makes you feel newly folded, like cloth shaken out and laid flat. The longhouse glow is still there, patient and steady, but the night has thickened around it. Darkness doesn't fall here like a curtain. It gathers like wool, layer by layer, soft and persistent, until the world is muffled into calm. Now the riddles step closer, not shouted, not performed. They appear the way a sleepy thought appears when you're almost drifting off. Unexpected, slightly absurd, and somehow comforting. You notice them on posts and beams, in patterns of weave and carve, in the way tools are hung with an order that looks simple until you try to imitate it. Even the animal pens hold riddles if you let them. Footprints crossing, straw flattened in shapes that suggest movement you didn't witness. You walk past a fence where the woven wattle repeats a rhythm, over, under, and then at one point, someone has intentionally broken it. Not sloppy, intentional. A single switch in the pattern like a wink. Your brain tries to fix it, as if the fence is a spreadsheet with an error, but the fence just sits there, unbothered, reminding you that not every irregularity needs correction. Some irregularities are a kind of play. You pass a doorway marked with a small carved sign. It could be a rune, or it could be the village's version of "don't forget to latch this." Or it could be a protective charm meant to keep bad luck wandering past. It might even be a joke, because people living close to hardship often develop humor as a quiet weapon. You don't know which interpretation is correct, and the night seems pleased by that. Ambiguity is allowed here. You don't have to solve everything to be safe. A gentle clatter draws your attention. Someone shaking out a wool blanket near the longhouse entrance. The blanket puffs and settles, releasing a faint dust of dried grass and warmth. The motion is so familiar it touches something in you. Some old memory of linens, of care, of small domestic rituals that say, without words, you matter enough to be comfortable. The blanket itself becomes a riddle, too. What is heavy but comforting, rough but kind, ordinary but essential? You drift inside the longhouse again, and the world changes in the way it does when you close a door on winter. Firelight paints everything in soft amber. Shadows breathe along the walls. The smoke layer overhead makes the ceiling feel distant, dreamlike. It's quiet, but not empty. Quiet like a room where everyone has agreed to rest their voices because the day was long and tomorrow will be honest about its demands. You settle near the hearth, and the mead returns to you not as a drink, but as a slow medicine for the mind. The bowl warms your palms. The scent rises, grain sweet, faint herbs, the soft bitterness that reminds you it's been made, not manufactured. You sip and feel that gentle gravity again, pulling your thoughts downward toward sleep. Around you, the longhouse holds a kind of low-level mental game. People glance at one another, at objects, at the fire, as if the world is full of clues and everyone is politely pretending not to notice until the right moment. The riddles here don't require a stage. They require attention. You find your gaze snagging on a cluster of simple things. A coil of rope, a wooden spoon, a comb used for wool. Each object feels like it could be the answer to something. You can almost sense the questions hovering around them, the way you can sense a word on the tip of your tongue. What has teeth but never bites? You glance at the wool comb. What runs without legs and sings without breath? Your mind drifts to the river. What is made by twisting but holds together by trust? You picture thread, rope, woven fences, the village itself. You don't speak the riddles aloud. You don't need to. In fact, the silence makes them softer, safer. It lets them exist as bedtime puzzles, little shapes for your mind to turn over slowly, the way you might turn a warm stone in your hand. And because you're human, and humans love patterns even when pretending they don't, you begin to notice how these riddles serve a purpose beyond entertainment. They sharpen attention without sharpening anxiety. They train memory without pressure. They create a shared language of noticing, an internal community where even tired minds can still play. You look down at your hands and realize there's still a trace of lanolin on your fingertips from the wool earlier. The smell is faint but present, a reminder of the riverside work. You rub your thumb against your fingers and feel the slight waxy texture. It grounds you, ties this warm interior to the damp world outside. It's another riddle. How can something from a sheep become a barrier against rain and cold? The answer is hidden in the material itself, in the way nature gives tools to those who pay attention. Near the hearth, you spot the woven reed basket again, tucked neatly beside a bench, waiting like an obedient companion. And there, the brass oil lamp, closer now, catching firelight on its curved surface. It gleams softly, shell gold in the dark, like a small sun trapped in metal. You don't touch it, but you note its calm readiness. Light stored and waiting. Another riddle. What holds night back without fighting it? The longhouse quiet deepens. The crackle of the hearth becomes slower, more irregular, like it's breathing. Your eyes follow the fire's small movements and begin to blur at the edges. You feel the village's rhythm settling into you. Work, warmth, wool, and these gentle puzzles that keep the mind from spiraling into harsher thoughts. And somewhere, very softly, you sense that the riddles are doing what bedtime stories have always done. Giving your mind something to hold that isn't fear. Something to chew without biting. Something to wonder without worrying. You take another sip, and the answer you didn't know you were seeking arrives in the simplest form. The night is safe enough to be playful. The village has made it so. The night doesn't demand that you stay still, but it does suggest it, like a hand pressing lightly between your shoulder blades, guiding you toward the calmer pace that keeps a village alive. You rise from the bench with unhurried care and drift along the longhouse wall, letting your eyes trace the soft order of everything. Where bowls rest, where tools hang, where wool is kept far enough from sparks to avoid disaster. You begin to see the village not as a backdrop, but as a system quietly designed, continuously maintained, and constantly aware that comfort is something you build, not something you buy. Near the hearth, food is being handled with a kind of humble reverence. Not dramatic, not ceremonial, simply careful. A pot is lifted, turned, set back. A ladle dips and returns. Someone scrapes a board clean, not because cleanliness is trendy, but because scraps attract pests and pests attract problems, and problems have consequences that don't care about your feelings. There's a rhythm to it all. Use, wipe, store, heat, stir, cover. The choreography of survival, performed with the gentlest possible hands. You step outside for a moment, and the village air feels cooler, layered with smoke and damp. Darkness has thickened into a blue-black that makes the thatch roofs look like rounded hills. A few points of light blink. A fire behind a shutter crack. A lamp being carried somewhere. The reflected gleam of the river. The sounds are small but distinct. A muted cough. The shift of feet on packed earth. The soft creak of wood adjusting to night temperature. You wander toward a small cooking area near one of the houses, perhaps an extension of the longhouse work, or perhaps a household preparing something separate. Either way, the scene is the same kind of calm. Bread is being managed, grain stored, and herbs handled with the matter-of-fact skill of people who know that flavor is nice but function matters too. You recognize the scent of smoke worked into everything, the way it does when most heat comes from fire and most nights end with your clothes smelling faintly like the hearth. You watch someone wrap something in cloth, tie it, and place it high on a shelf. Your modern brain wants labels and containers and neat little kitchen hacks. This village has its own version. Height keeps food away from animals. Smoke keeps some things preserved. Tight weave cloth keeps dust and insects out. You realize that storage here is not a closet. It's strategy. And then, because your mind is still under the influence of sleepy riddles, you start noticing how chores themselves are a kind of riddle with an answer called tomorrow. What do you do with leftovers so they don't become rot? What do you do with ash so it doesn't become mess? What do you do with damp wool so it doesn't become mold? What do you do with tools so they don't vanish into chaos? Each question is answered in the same quiet language. You put things where they belong. You dry, you cover, you hang, you stack. You treat the small things like they matter because they do. You drift toward a stack of firewood, neatly arranged under a simple shelter. The logs are sorted by size, some split, some left thicker, all positioned so the driest pieces are easiest to reach. It's almost pleasingly obsessive, like someone here would absolutely dominate at modern home organization if only they weren't busy surviving winter. But the order isn't for aesthetics. It's for speed in the cold, for efficiency in the dark, for making sure the hearth doesn't die while everyone sleeps. You pass by a low bench where bits of wool cloth are folded into small stacks. They aren't perfectly matched. The edges aren't machine straight, but the folds are deliberate. Each piece is ready to be grabbed, used as a wrap, a head covering, a patch, a bandage, or simply something warm to tuck around a child's shoulders. Cloth here is not fashion. It is possibility. Your gaze lands again on the woven reed basket. It sits near the bench like it always has, humble and faithful, holding odds and ends. A few scraps of wool, perhaps some twine, maybe a handful of dried herbs. The basket's weave is tight, strong, and slightly uneven in a way that makes it feel alive. It is a container, yes, but also an emblem of this place. Fibers turned into support. Nearby, the brass oil lamp waits, its surface catching whatever light it can. You finally understand why it keeps appearing in your field of vision. It is the village's promise that darkness won't be absolute. That if the hearth dims, if someone needs to move at night, if a problem must be tended, there is a small stored sun ready to help. You can't help thinking, sleepily, sarcastically, that your phone flashlight feels suddenly very spoiled and very fragile in comparison. You take another slow walk back toward the longhouse. Along the way, you notice how the village is designed to minimize damage. Paths are clear enough to walk safely. Water is close enough to carry. Tools are hung high enough to keep children safe and to keep blades from disappearing. Doorways are positioned to cut drafts. Thatch is thick and angled to shed rain. Even the way people move is damage control. No sudden rushing, no careless gestures near fire, no dramatic flailing. It strikes you that this is what peace often looks like in real life. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of habits that stop problems from growing teeth. The village's calm isn't naive. It's engineered. Back inside the longhouse, the hearth continues its patient glow. You settle again near warmth, letting the smells and textures wrap around you. smoke above, wool beside, mead still faintly sweet in your body. The day's work, bread, wood, cloth, tools, has been folded into the night, stored in its proper place. And with that order comes a particular kind of safety, the kind that lets the mind relax into play, the kind that makes riddles feel like pillows instead of tests. You exhale, long and slow, and feel the village's soft discipline steady your heart, as if it's teaching you how to rest without guilt. You sit long enough near the hearth for the village's order to seep into you, the way warmth seeps into hands wrapped around a bowl. The crackle becomes a slow percussion. The smoke overhead drifts in lazy layers, like thoughts that refuse to hurry. Somewhere close, wool shifts as someone folds it again, and the sound is so soft it barely qualifies as sound. It's more like a suggestion that comfort is being maintained. Eventually your eyes find the weaver's space, tucked along the longhouse wall where the firelight reaches but doesn't interfere. The loom stands there with quiet authority. Wooden frame, taut lines, a structure built to hold tension without snapping. You realize with a small inner smirk that the loom is basically a medieval stress management tool. It takes pressure and turns it into something useful. You drift closer. The warp threads run straight and steady, pale as river mist. They're stretched tight, disciplined, unwavering. The weft thread moves across them in patient passes, one line at a time, building cloth the way the village builds calm. Incrementally, methodically, without drama. The rhythm is hypnotic. Lift, pass, press, release. A cycle that doesn't need applause. You watch the weaver's hands. Again, hands tell the truth here. Fingers guide the shuttle with familiarity. The motion is practiced but not rushed. Every pass is deliberate because every mistake costs time, and time is not an abstract concept in a place where darkness and cold are real opponents. Still, the work doesn't feel anxious. It feels like breathing, a repeated action that keeps life steady. The cloth growing on the loom is muted in color, earth tones, softened reds and browns, the grayish cream of undyed wool. You can imagine plant dyes being coaxed from roots and bark, simmered in pots, soaked into fibers with that same quiet persistence you saw in everything else. Nothing is neon. Nothing is trying to go viral. It's all made to last, and that longevity is its own kind of beauty. You let your attention follow the shuttle back and forth until the movement becomes a lullaby for your mind. The loom's rhythm starts to echo something you've been hearing all night. The river. Outside, the water runs with its own steady pattern, never identical from moment to moment, but always carrying a consistent pulse. Inside, the loom repeats a pattern you can almost predict. Lift, pass, press. Lift, pass, press. The two rhythms overlap in your head, and you feel your thoughts drifting into that overlap like a small boat finding the current. You step outside again, drawn by the memory of the river's sound. The air meets you cool and damp, and you inhale it like it's part of the lesson. The village is quieter now. Fewer movements, fewer tasks still unfolding, but the river refuses to sleep. It slides past reeds, nudges stones, tugs gently at roots. You stand at the bank and listen. The water's rhythm isn't just soothing, it's instructive. It teaches you that motion can be constant without being frantic. It teaches you that you can keep going without forcing it. It teaches you, in the simplest possible way, that repetition is not a prison when the repetition creates warmth. You glance back toward the longhouse and think of the loom again, wood holding tension, thread passing through it, cloth emerging. The river does the same with landscape. It holds the village in its curve, threads through reeds and silt, and shapes the shoreline over time. Different materials, same principle. Gentle persistence reshaping the world. A thin mist curls along the water's surface, and for a moment it looks like unspun wool, drifting and waiting. You remember the feel of lanolin on your fingertips earlier, and you rub your thumb against your skin as if checking that it's still real. The trace is faint now, but the memory remains. Raw fleece, comb teeth, twist into thread. You realize the village is full of transformations that happen without spectacle. Mist into dew, fleece into cloth, grain into mead, fatigue into a quieter mind. Near the bank, the woven reed basket appears again. Of course it does. Sitting close to where someone has been carrying tools or fleece. It looks slightly darker now, dampened by night air, but still sturdy. You let your eyes rest on its weave and see another quiet lesson. Individual reeds are weak, but woven together they become strong enough to carry weight, which is, frankly, a little too emotionally relevant for a bedtime story. But you let it land gently anyway. Not far from the basket, the brass oil lamp is brought out, and for a moment it catches the faint firelight from the longhouse and gleams like a small, contained dawn. It's not lit yet. It doesn't need to be. Its presence is reassurance. If someone must move, if a problem must be handled, if a child wakes and needs comfort, there is light ready to be coaxed into the world without panic. You return inside with the river's sound still in your ears. The loom is still there, still holding its steady tension. You watch a few more passes of thread and feel your breathing align again. Inhale, lift, exhale, press. Your mind, which usually tries to sprint even when you're exhausted, begins to accept the village's slower terms. And then you notice something almost funny, in that gentle, sleepy way. The riddles are still happening, but they've changed tone. Earlier they were curiosities hiding in fence patterns and carved marks. Now they're embodied in rhythm itself. What moves back and forth and makes warmth? The loom. What moves forward and never stops and makes life possible? The river. What repeats and repeats until it becomes a blanket? Work done kindly. You don't answer out loud. You simply feel the answers settle into your chest like mead warmth, like hearth heat, like the comforting weight of wool. You let the longhouse hold you, and you let the river keep singing outside, and somewhere between those two rhythms, your thoughts grow soft enough to rest. You feel the pull to keep moving, not because you're restless, but because the village is built to be understood in motion. Sitting by the hearth teaches you warmth. Watching the loom teaches you patience. Now the night nudges you outward again, toward the edges, the places that define what the village is and what it is not. You step outside and let the cooler air press lightly against your cheeks. The sky is darker now, a smooth, deep bowl above the thatch roofs. Smoke thins as it rises, dissolving into night like a thought you almost remember. The river's sound remains steady, a low, ongoing hush, and the mist still drifts along the bank as if it has decided to guard the village by softening every outline. A narrow path curves away from the longhouse, worn into the ground by repetition. This isn't a scenic trail designed for leisure. It's a working path. Feet have pressed it into being year after year in rain and frost and mud. The earth is packed where it needs to be. The grass is flattened where it must yield. You follow it with the quiet caution of someone who understands that stepping wrong at night is not a cute mistake. It's the kind of mistake that turns into tomorrow's limp. The path leads you towards simple boundary markers. Low fences, shallow ditches, stacked stones, and occasional posts with carved signs that look both practical and faintly mysterious. These aren't grand monuments. They don't scream, "History happened here." They whisper, "Don't wander into the wrong field." And this is where one family's work ends and another's begins. And we learned, the hard way, that vague boundaries invite trouble. You slow down near one post. The carving on it catches a trace of firelight from the village, and for a moment it looks like a sleeping face. Lines and angles, old marks softened by weather. Your mind wants to classify it. Rune, tally, charm. Could be any of those or a blend. This is the night's riddle again. What is written without paper, remembered without books, enforced without shouting? The answer feels simple and heavy at once: routine, shared agreement, the quiet consensus that keeps a place from unraveling. You walk further, and the village feels different at its edge. Not colder exactly, but more exposed. The longhouse glow behind you becomes smaller, and the river sound becomes larger. The world beyond the settlement is a broad, dark presence. Trees, fields, and the unseen stretch of land that doesn't care whether you're tired. Here, you understand why the village is so gentle inside. The gentleness is not because life is easy. The gentleness is because the outside is indifferent. A boundary path is not a romantic stroll. It's a nightly reassurance that the fence still holds, the animals are still where they should be, and no one has ignored a latch or left a gap that invites chaos in. You pause near a low fence made of woven branches. Earlier you noticed a deliberate break in pattern, like a playful wink. Out here the pattern is stricter. Even so, you see tiny variations, places where a hand made a choice, where a branch bent differently, where a repair has been done. The fence is like cloth. It holds because it's tended. The same principle as the loom, just expressed in wood and patience. A small movement catches your eye, an animal shifting in its pen, the faint rustle of straw. The sound is gentle, sleepy. You imagine the warmth of bodies behind woven walls, and the quiet vigilance required to keep that warmth safe. There's no dramatic guard patrol, no torches blazing with theatrical urgency. Just people who check their edges because they'd rather sleep than solve preventable disasters. You continue along the path until you come upon a simple marker near the riverbank. Stones set in a line, half sunk into earth, moss starting to claim them. They might mark a crossing place or the edge of a shared strip of land. They might also be a reminder. Water gives life, but it also moves and takes and reshapes. The river is generous, but it is never owned in the way a field can be owned. You can only live beside it, learn its moods, and keep your routine steady. Your thoughts drift, slow and warm. You find yourself holding a new kind of riddle, one that isn't about objects, but about people. What keeps a village together when life is hard? Not speeches, not slogans, not the illusion of constant happiness. It's smaller than that. It's the way a path is walked enough times to become a path. It's the way a fence is repaired before it fails. It's the way wool is combed and spun and woven until it becomes something that keeps a child from shivering. It's the way food is stored and ash is cleared and tools are hung back in their places. It's kinship, yes, but kinship expressed through chores, not through grand declarations. You reach a spot where the boundary path curves back toward the village. The longhouse glow is visible again, and it looks gentler from here, like a hearthlight star. Near the curve, you notice the woven reed basket set down on the ground beside a post, as if someone paused here earlier to adjust a load or check a latch. The basket is dampened by night air, but it holds its shape. It's weave stubborn and reliable. You can't help thinking, half amused, half sleepy, that this basket is the village's unofficial mascot. Quiet, useful, always present, and never asking for credit. Beside it sits the brass oil lamp, unlit but ready, its surface catching a thin sliver of light. Feels like a promise. Not a loud promise, not a dramatic promise. Just the calm assurance that if the night demands a little movement, the village has prepared for it. Light can be carried. Darkness can be negotiated. No panic required. You turn back and walk toward the center again. The path under your feet is familiar now, and you realize that familiarity itself is a kind of protection. The village doesn't defend itself with constant aggression. It defends itself with continuity, with patterns that are repeated until they become instinct, with small repairs done early, with people who know the land not as scenery, but as a partner that must be treated with steady respect. As you step back into the warmth zone, the place where smoke and hearth and will meet, you feel a quiet gratitude that doesn't need words. Your mind is slower, softer, and strangely steadier, like thread that has been twisted just enough to hold. And somewhere inside you, the boundary path leaves its mark. A simple lesson that feels almost too gentle to be powerful, but is, keep your edges tended, and your center can stay warm. You come back into the longhouse with the outside night still clinging to you. Mist on your sleeves, cold tucked into the seams of your clothes, and the warmth meets you like a practiced hand. The hearth doesn't flare. It simply continues, steady and certain, as if fire has never believed in overreacting. Smoke drifts under the rafters in slow bands. Wool and wood and mead-sweet air fold around you, and your body accepts the change the way it accepts a blanket, without debate. The village settles deeper now. Movements become smaller. Tools are put away with a little more care. The bench creaks once and then holds still. You can feel the moment when evening becomes night, when the day's loose ends stop tugging at your sleeves and start dissolving into something softer. And in that softer space, the riddles thicken. They're no longer only things you spot with your eyes. Carved marks, a woven break in a fence, a pattern that refuses to be perfectly regular. They become the atmosphere. They become the longhouse's quiet way of making darkness feel manageable. Questions arrive in you the way drowsiness arrives. Gently, insistently, without needing permission. You sit where the heat reaches your knees. The clay bowl returns to your hands, and the mead's warmth slides into you again, sweet and faintly herbal. You sip slowly, letting it do what it does best, turn urgency into patience. Across the room, a strip of wool cloth hangs to dry, slightly uneven, the kind of thing made more with steadiness than perfection. Firelight touches the weave in tiny shifts, and you realize cloth is already a bedtime puzzle. What begins as tangled fleece and ends as protection? The answer is in the twist of thread, the press of the loom, the hands that don't rush. Your eyelids lower halfway, and the world blurs at the edges in the most useful way. In that blur, you start recognizing repeating structures, patterns not meant to stump you, but to soothe you. Warmth always sits at the center. Everything circles it: food, wool, bodies, quiet work. Like the river holds the village in its curve, the hearth holds the longhouse in its glow. You don't have to solve that. You just have to let it hold you. Anything important gets repeated. Fold the cloth, hang the tool, cover the food, add the wood. These repeats aren't a loop you're trapped in. They're a rhythm you're carried by. Your modern brain, trained to demand novelty, tries to fidget. The village answers with a calm refusal. Novelty is optional. Continuity is not. Then there's the playful pattern. Questions with no urgency. The brass oil lamp catches a flicker of firelight and gleams, and you think, sleepily, what holds daylight in a metal belly, and how it stays patient until needed. You glance at the woven reed basket and wonder what can be empty and still be useful, what can hold weight without being heavy itself. You listen to the river outside and ask what speaks without words and never runs out of breath. None of these questions demand a correct answer right now. That's the point. These riddles aren't a contest. They're a tool for tired minds. They keep attention gentle. They keep the dark from filling every corner of thought. You remember the boundary path you walked, the posts and markers and careful edges. The village tends its borders so the center can stay warm. The riddles do something similar inside you. They nudge your mind away from sharper places and back towards something safe to hold. A pattern, a texture, a simple wondering. You glance up at the beam with carved marks and try, lazily, to imagine what they mean. A tally of seasons, a memory of floodwater, a charm against fire, a reminder not to leave a latch loose. The ambiguity doesn't frustrate you anymore, calms you. Your day has likely been full of forced certainty, deadlines, decisions, the endless demand to be right. Here, the night offers you a different kind of intelligence. The ability to let something remain partly unknown without feeling threatened. Firelight shifts, and for a moment the longhouse looks like a moving tapestry. Shadows sliding over wool, smoke softening the rafters, faces half seen and then gone again. It's almost theatrical, but it never tips into performance. The effect is gentle, like a bedside lamp making the room feel smaller and safer. Outside, the river keeps its hush. Inside, the loom's earlier rhythm seems to echo in memory. Lift, pass, press, until it merges with the hearth's crackle and your own breathing. Inhale warmth, exhale release. Your body begins to recognize that the night's job isn't to entertain you, it's to carry you, The riddles deepen again, becoming less about objects and more about you. What do you carry into a room without realizing it? What can you set down without losing it? What is heavy and invisible and still can be folded away for the night? You answer without words. You let your shoulders drop. You let your jaw unclench. You let the longhouse hold your attention the way wool holds heat. Quietly, reliably, without demanding thanks. The brass oil lamp remains unlit, and that feels right. Not everything must be used just because it exists. The basket remains where it is, emptying and filling as needed, without complaint. The hearth continues, the village continues, and you find yourself matching their steadiness, your thoughts slowing until they become more like mist than like machinery. By the time you lean back against the wall, you can feel the night's final pattern taking shape, this one the gentlest of all. Every question eventually becomes quiet enough to fall asleep. You don't notice the problem at first because the village is so good at being calm. It makes you assume everything is fine, the way a steady fire makes you assume it will always be there, even though you know, if you're honest, that fires go out the moment people stop caring for them. But then you see it. A pause that's slightly too long, hands hovering where they usually move with certainty. Near the longhouse wall, where folded cloth and sorted fleece are kept at a safe distance from sparks. Someone stands with their shoulders angled forward, as if listening with their whole back. Their hands lift a covering, adjust it, lift it again. Another set of hands joins, fingers tracing the edge of a stack, pressing down as if to confirm what the eyes are already refusing to accept. The motion isn't frantic, it's controlled, which, ironically, is how you can tell it matters. You drift closer, careful not to step like a modern person who thinks urgency is a virtue. The air feels the same, smoke and warmth, mead sweetness still lingering, but the texture of attention in the room tightens, like a thread being drawn taut on the loom. A bundle of wool is missing, not a decorative scrap, not a small tuft someone could misplace and laugh about later. A real bundle, sorted fleece or rolled cloth, something that took hours to clean and prepare, something that could become a cloak edge, a blanket layer, a child's mitt, a patch that keeps a draft from cutting through. In this world, missing wool is not oops. It's winter leaning closer. You look at the remaining stacks. They're tidy in that practical way the village prefers. Folded, covered, kept near enough to reach, far enough from fire to survive. And now one tidy shape is absent. The negative space is obvious once you see it, like a missing tooth in a calm smile. The longhouse doesn't erupt into noise. There is no dramatic accusation, no theatrical stomping. Instead, the village does something more unsettling in its own quiet way. It becomes watchful. People shift their weight differently. Eyes move, not darting, but scanning doors, corners, shelves, the path of foot traffic. The steadiness remains, but it is steadiness with a new purpose. Your mind, still half soaked in sleepy riddles, tries to turn this into a question rather than a panic. What disappears without smoke? What leaves no footprints yet changes the room? What is missing and makes everyone count? The answer isn't comforting. Wool is a form of safety, and safety being missing makes even kind people sharpen their attention. You glance toward the riverside of the longhouse, toward the doorway where mist lingers just beyond the threshold. The outside night suddenly feels a touch larger. Not dangerous exactly, just more present, as if it heard the word missing and leaned in to listen. You stand there, mead warmth still in your chest, and feel the odd experience of being an outsider in a moment that matters. You don't have the village's history in your bones. You don't know which hands always fold which bundles, which corner always holds the fine fleece, which shelf is used for repairs and which for finished cloth. But you can read the basic truth. This loss is small in size and large in consequence. Someone kneels and checks beneath a bench, lifting the edge of a blanket, peering into the dim where firelight can't fully reach. Another person moves toward the wool combs and spindles, scanning as if the missing bundle might have been carried there for work. A few steps cross the packed earth floor, measured, careful, as if too much speed might knock over the last threads of calm. You notice, too, what doesn't happen. No one points. No one performs outrage. No one turns the room into a courtroom. Whatever suspicion might exist is kept under the same discipline that keeps sparks away from wool. This is a community that understands how quickly a careless flame can become a disaster. Still, the longhouse feels different now. The hearth crackle seems slightly louder in the quiet attention. Shadows look a bit sharper. Even the carved marks on the beams feel less playful for a moment, as if the riddles have decided to stop winking and start watching. You scan the space the way you scan a room when you've misplaced something important, except this isn't your wallet or your keys. This is warmth in its future form. Your eyes land on the woven reed basket, sitting near the wall where it often waits, faithful and ordinary. Tonight it looks more significant, as if it could be either innocent or involved simply because it's a container and containers are always suspects when something is gone. You lean slightly toward it and see what it holds. Small scraps, twine, maybe dried herbs. Nothing bulky enough to be the missing bundle. It doesn't solve the problem, but it rules out one small fear, and that's how calm is preserved here. By eliminating possibilities one by one, rather than exploding into conclusions. Then you spot the brass oil lamp. It's closer to the doorway now, as if someone has shifted it within reach. The lamp isn't lit, but it catches a shimmer of firelight, and you understand the quiet logic. If searching must happen, light may be needed. Not for drama, just for accuracy. Darkness makes mistakes easier. You feel in your own body a subtle change. Your breath gets a little shallower, your senses a little sharper. You're not panicked, but you're awake in a new way. The village's calm has not broken. It has concentrated, like mead reduced down to sweetness, like wool tightened into thread. And because you've been learning the village's style all night, you don't rush in with solutions or speeches. You simply position yourself where you can help. Near enough to notice details, quiet enough not to disturb the careful scanning that's already begun. The night remains gentle, but it is now a gentle night with a question hanging in it. A question that weighs more than it should for something as soft as wool. Where did the warmth go? The hearth answers with steady glow, as if to reassure you. The village still has its center. Now it only needs to find what's missing from the edges of its order, before the absence grows into something colder. You begin the search the way this village does everything. without theatrics, without the modern habit of treating every inconvenience like an emergency broadcast. The missing wool sits in the longhouse like a small hole in the evening's fabric, and the room responds by tightening attention rather than raising volume. You return to the storage spot and let your eyes do what your hands did at the riverside: sort, separate, notice. The remaining stacks are covered and weighted so drafts cannot flip them open. Sizes are grouped. The finer fibers sit nearer the safer wall, farther from sparks. This is careful work. The absence matters because the wool mattered first. You don't hunt for a culprit. You trace routes. Wool travels through hands, along paths, into baskets, toward work. If you want to find it, you follow the ordinary. First, the loom corner, because cloth begins there, and a bundle might have been pulled for weaving. You crouch near the beam and scan for signs of recent handling. Loose fibers clinging to wood, a fresh lanolin sheen where a palm pressed. The warp stays taut and tidy. The shuttle rests where it belongs. Beneath the bench, the wisps look old, part of the normal shedding of work, not the burst of a newly opened bundle. Next, the wool combs and spindles, because fleece becomes thread here, and thread becomes warmth. You study the bench, the comb's blunt teeth, the spindle's quiet point. You sweep your gaze over the ground where dropped fibers would show against darker soil. Again, nothing that points loudly. The village seems to prefer quiet clues. So you shift to the longhouse edges, where tired hands set things down and forget. The brass oil lamp has been nudged closer to the doorway, placed within easy reach. It remains unlit, but its new position changes the room's posture. It's a silent agreement. If the search must reach into shadow, light will go with you. You lift the lamp carefully. It's cool, heavier than it looks, and it steadies your hands by asking you to move slowly. With it, you check the places where objects slip when the night grows thick. Beneath benches, behind stacked firewood, near the wall where cloaks hang, by the shelves that hold grain and cloth. You don't append piles. You slide a cover aside, look, then set it back exactly as it was. Order is part of the village's safety. Losing order while searching would be a second loss. You notice small things that don't belong where they sit. A loose strip of binding cloth, a twisted cord, a tie that looks freshly strained. You gather them into the woven reed basket. The basket does what it always does, holds the scattered pieces without complaint. It doesn't solve anything yet, but it keeps the search from becoming another kind of mess. The question insists on expansion. You step to the doorway and feel the river's cold breath meeting the hearth's heat. Mist waits outside, softening the village into silhouettes. This is when the lamp earns its place. You coax a small flame into being, and the brass belly answers with a contained glow, just enough to make details honest. You walk into the night with lamp in one hand and basket in the other, and you start with the simplest route, the path between Longhouse and Riverside Work Shelter where you handled fleece earlier. Wool is soft, but it catches and snags and leaves traces. You move slowly, letting the lamplight rake across the ground. Packed earth shows scuffs and shallow prints layered into the village's usual memory of movement. You look for freshness instead. A patch of straw recently disturbed, a darker smear of damp soil where a load was set down, pale fibers pressed into mud like tiny commas. You pause near a woven fence and remember the earlier deliberate break in its pattern, the playful wink you spotted when the night still felt purely gentle. Now you read fences differently. Patterns are not only games, they are maps. If a latch is handled, if a gate is used, the weave and the ground keep the record. The river sound grows louder as you near the bank, a steady hush that keeps your thoughts from sprinting. Mist curls around posts like unspun wool. You reach the shelter and lift the lamp higher. The light schemes over boards, tools, the edge of a bench. And there, near a rough plank at the shelter's side, you see a small scatter of pale fibers that look newer than the rest. They cling to a splintered edge, as if something brushed past and left a whisper behind. A few more threads lie lightly dragged toward darker grass beyond. Not a trail you'd notice in daylight, but in lamplight at this angle, it becomes a suggestion with direction. It isn't a solution, it's barely a sentence, but it is movement, and movement is what gentle searching is made of. You breathe in, slow and steady, and let your next step be as quiet as the river. You follow the faint trail the way you follow a lullaby, one soft note at a time, letting it lead you without forcing it to explain itself too quickly. The lamp's flame is small but sincere, and the brass curves hold it steady as you move. Its light slides over damp grass, over packed earth, over the edges of boards and reeds, revealing the night's handwriting. Scuffs, pressed blades, pale fibers caught where something brushed past. The cluster of fresh wool threads on the splintered plank becomes your first anchor. You lean in, and the fibers glow softly in lamplight, almost silver, like the river mist decided to become tangible. You lift one between your fingers, clings, then releases light as a breath. It doesn't feel like evidence in a dramatic sense. It feels like a mistake that left its fingerprints. You shift the lamp lower, angling the light across the ground the way you'd angle your eyes across a woven pattern to see where it breaks. The fibers continue, sparse, not a straight line, more like a hesitant scatter. A tuft here, a whisper there. You take a step, then another, letting the reeds ahead fill your vision. The riverbank is darker than the village center, and the mist seems thicker here, curling around posts and roots as if it's trying to tuck everything in. The river's hush grows louder, not because it's shouting, but because the longhouse's warmth is farther away now, and your ears have space to listen. Water keeps moving with the calm confidence of something that doesn't need your approval. You lift the lamp higher. Its reflection trembles on the river's surface, a small golden oval shivering among ripples. The light reveals reeds in layers, some upright, some bent, some tangled at the base where the waterline constantly rearranges them. And then you see it. A thin strand of wool snagged on a reed stalk, caught just above the water. It hangs there like a delicate warning flag. You step closer, careful not to sink your foot into mud deep enough to swallow your dignity. The strand is fresh, still slightly clumped in places, as if it hasn't been combed smooth. You trace it with your eyes down the reed stalk to the darker mess of roots and waterweed. The river, unbothered by your concerns, slides past and tugs gently at everything that dares to hang near it. You crouch and let the lamp illuminate the reed base. Another tuft appears, paler, thicker, and beneath it, Something darker and bulkier sits half hidden in the wet tangle. At first it looks like shadow. Then it takes shape. A wrapped bundle, not submerged, but damp at the edges, wedged where reeds press together like a living clamp. Your breath eases out, not as triumph, but as relief. You found missing, and it's exactly what it looks like. A bundle meant to stay dry that ended up close enough to the river to become a lesson. You reach toward it and pause. The village's habits are in you now. Don't rush, don't yank, don't turn a solvable problem into a worse one. You set the lamp on a stable patch of ground and use both hands to ease the bundle free. The reeds resist slightly, then release, and the cloth wrap comes into full view. It's not torn open. It hasn't been rummaged through. It isn't scattered like something stolen and dropped. It's intact, only damp where river air and reed moisture have crept in. That detail matters. Theft tends to be messy. Accidents tend to be quiet. You lift the bundle and feel its weight, familiar from earlier, warmth in the making. Your fingertips pick up the same faint lanolin texture, softened now by damp. A few loose fibers cling to your sleeves, and you can almost see the path it took. Brushed against a rough plank, snagged on reeds, nudged by water's breath. You carry it back toward the shelter with the lamp held close, letting the brass glow keep your steps honest. The woven reed basket bumps gently against your leg, still holding the small gathered pieces. Cords, strips, and a tie that looked newly strained. You stop under the shelter and set the recovered bundle on a board where it won't touch the wet ground. Now you bring the basket into the light and let it speak. You sift through what you collected, slowly, like someone sorting fleece. There's a length of cord with a frayed end, fibers snapped rather than cut. There's a strip of binding cloth twisted hard enough to crease. And there's one tie that looks different, stretched, as if it held a load that shifted suddenly. You hold that tie beside the recovered bundle's wrap. The match is obvious in the lamplight, not identical in a forensic investigation way, but familiar in the way village work is familiar. Same rough fiber, same thickness, same simple knot style. The tie in your basket feels like the one that failed when the bundle was being carried. You picture it without needing anyone to narrate it for you. Someone lifted the wool, wrapped and tied, and carried it here. Maybe to keep it away from sparks, maybe to air it, maybe to move it for work at the riverside. A basket could have helped. A cord could have been used. A step could have slipped. A knot could have loosened. The bundle could have slid, bumped a plank, dragged fibers, then dropped into reeds where the river mist and waterweed held it like a damp hand. No villain required. The river is excellent at making problems look like mysteries. It moves constantly, rearranging small things. It steals nothing intentionally. It simply accepts what falls into its reach. In that way, it's the village's sternest teacher. Quiet, patient, and uninterested in excuses. You touch the bundle's damp edge and feel the practical next thought rise. This will needs drying. Not as a dramatic save-the-day moment, but as a calm continuation of the village's logic. Recovering is only half the work. Repairing the order is the other half. You lift the lamp again and glance back toward the longhouse glow. The light looks warmer from here, like a promise kept. You take the bundle in your arms with the steady care it deserves, the way you'd carry something fragile that will later become strong. As you walk, you feel the riddle of the night shifting shape. It isn't who took the wool, it's how did the wool travel? That's a gentler question. It doesn't split a community into suspicion and defense. It keeps everyone on the same side of the problem, the side that wants warmth to remain shared. The river hush follows you as you return, and the lamp's glow rocks softly in your hand, like the village itself is breathing with you. Slow, steady, ready to mend what was nearly misunderstood. You return with the bundle held close, not cradled like a trophy, but carried like something that matters because it will matter again later. The brass oil lamp leads your steps with its small contained glow, and the river's mist follows behind you like a quiet witness. As the longhouse grows nearer, the warmth ahead looks less like comfort and more like an organized center, a place where problems can be solved without becoming disasters. Inside, the longhouse attention shifts the moment you cross the threshold. People don't rush you, and no one demands a dramatic explanation. They simply notice. Their posture changes. The tightness that had settled over the room loosens by degrees, the way a knot loosens when you stop pulling it the wrong way. You set the bundle down near the safe storage spot, away from sparks, and you place the lamp beside it so the light can make the details honest. The wrap is damp along one edge. A few wool fibers cling to it in little clumps where moisture has kissed lanolin and made it hold together. Nothing is ruined, but the situation has made itself clear. This wasn't a clean disappearance. It was a messy movement. You place the woven reed basket down and tip its contents gently onto a cloth. Cord pieces, a twisted binding strip, and the stretched tie. Small items, easy to ignore unless you have learned tonight that small items are how a village stays alive. The longhouse remains quiet, but the quiet now feels different. Earlier it was watchful. Now it is receptive. It's the kind of silence that makes room for understanding rather than suspicion. And because this village loves riddles, not as games to humiliate, but as gentle ways of guiding thought, you feel the evening shift into something like a sleepy trial. Not a courtroom with punishments, more like a communal habit of reasoning that protects dignity. The trial begins the way these nights have taught you to begin anything, by noticing patterns. You lift the stretched tie and hold it up to the lamplight. The fibers look frayed, snapped in a way that suggests strain rather than deliberate cutting. You compare it to the knot style on the bundle's wrap. The similarity is strong enough to steer the mind. This tie belonged to the job of carrying, not to the act of stealing. You point the lamp toward the damp edge of the wrap and then toward the wool clumps. Damp wool holds differently. It compresses, clings, and gathers debris from reeds and riverbank plant matter in a way dry wool doesn't. The edge of the wrap holds faint traces, tiny reed bits and a smear of river mud. Not much, but enough. The longhouse doesn't need a confession. It needs a plausible path. You remember the splintered plank at the riverside shelter, the snagged fibers, the strand caught on reeds. You don't narrate it as a heroic discovery. You let it remain what it is. The story of how objects travel when tired hands move them in the dark. The longhouse holds that story the way it holds warmth. It doesn't argue loudly. It absorbs, considers, and reshapes. Now the riddle form arrives naturally, as if the village's calm logic prefers questions over accusations. What is taken without intention? What is lost while being carried? What leaves traces without meaning to? What falls and is held by reeds, and seems stolen until light is brought? You feel the answer settle around the room like smoke. A slip, a strained knot, a bundle set down too near the bank. An ordinary mistake dressed up as mystery by the dark. The lamp's glow makes another detail visible. One corner of the wrap has a crease, a hard fold, as if the bundle was shoved briefly into a container or under an arm and then shifted suddenly. You glance at the reed basket and consider it. A basket is wonderful until it isn't. If the load is awkward, if the tie is weak, if the path is damp and uneven, a basket can tilt and betray you in a heartbeat. The village knows that. Everyone here has been betrayed by an object at some point. It's basically a rite of passage. The emotional temperature changes. Earlier, the missing will pulled people into a sharp, invisible edge. Who might have done this? Who might be hiding something? Now the edges soften. The problem is still real, but it belongs to the category the village handles best. Practical issues that can be fixed. And there's something quietly humane in that shift. A community can tear itself apart over suspicion faster than it can freeze. The Longhouse seems to understand that instinctively. That's why the reasoning here is gentle. That's why the riddles are sleepy. They guide minds away from blame and toward repair. You feel your own body relax again, and you realize you've been holding a small tension you didn't notice. Because even you, a visitor, could feel how quickly missing could become someone did this. Now you breathe more deeply. You let your shoulders drop. The next step becomes obvious. The wool must be dried and protected. The damp edge needs air. The wrap needs loosening. The bundle needs to be set where smoke and warmth can help, without sparks threatening. You watch hands move with careful competence. The bundle is opened slightly, not exposed to risk, just given space. The wool is fluffed gently where damp has compressed it. It's the same patience you saw in spinning and weaving, never yanking, never rushing, always working with the material rather than against it. The brass oil lamp is set aside again. Unlit now, its job done. It looks almost smug in the firelight, like it's thinking, "See, this is why you keep me around." You, for your part, feel a private agreement with it. Light doesn't fix problems by itself. It simply makes them less likely to become lies. The woven reed basket returns to its quiet role, collecting the cords and ties so they can be repaired or replaced. Because in this village nothing is wasted without reason. Even a failed tie is a teacher. It tells you what needs strengthening. The Longhouse returns to its earlier calm, but with a new undertone. Relief that didn't have to humiliate anyone, and gratitude that the village's logic remained kinder than its fear. And as the night continues, you sense that the trial has ended the way all good sleepy riddles should end. Not with a winner, but with warmth restored and a community still intact. With the wool recovered and the room's attention softened back into its usual slow rhythm, you watch the village do what it does best. Turn a problem into maintenance, and maintenance into calm. The bundle isn't treated like a rescued treasure. It's treated like a working thing that needs care. That somehow is the greatest compliment here. Objects are loved by being used wisely, not by being praised. The damp edge of the wrap is loosened and opened just enough for air to reach it. Not exposed in a way that invites sparks, but allowed to breathe. A few hands fluff the compressed wool with that same gentle pressure you saw at the riverside. Fingers lifting, separating fibers, giving them space to dry. Smoke and warmth from the hearth drift through the longhouse in slow layers, and you can almost feel the wool responding, turning from clammy to merely cool, from merely cool to safe again. The cords and ties you brought back are set aside on a cloth. A frayed length is not discarded. It is examined, felt, and when the decision is made, trimmed and retwisted, as if even failure can be spun into something usable. You remember the spindle's rhythm and realize that repair has its own version. Loosen, rebind, tighten, loosen, rebind, tighten. The village doesn't only weave cloth, it weaves continuity. You sit near the hearth and let the scene settle into you. The earlier watchfulness is gone now. In its place is a quiet tenderness, a sense that everyone has brushed up against the edge of suspicion and decided, collectively, to step back from it. That is not a small thing. It is, in fact, one of the most advanced skills a community can have. You notice how the longhouse returns to ordinary motions as if returning to breath. A bowl is rinsed. A cloak is folded. A tool is hung. Wool is checked again, adjusted, covered. No one turns the moment into a lecture. No one needs to. The lesson has already been absorbed. Ties fail, loads slip, reeds catch what falls, and the dark can make simple accidents look like threats. The answer is not panic. The answer is light and steadiness. Your mind, still wrapped in the village's sleepy riddles, reshapes the whole incident into something gentler. What is lost but not stolen? What is found when you stop accusing and start noticing? What is repaired without anyone needing to be shamed? The answers settle like warm ash. A bundle, a community, and the evening itself. Someone brings the woven reed basket closer to the storage corner. It's used the way it's always used, quietly, faithfully, as a container for whatever needs to be gathered. Today it holds repaired ties and small scraps that can be reused. Tomorrow it may hold fleece or grain or herbs. It doesn't care. It just holds. You find yourself liking it in an absurdly personal way, as if a basket can become a friend simply by doing its job without drama. The brass oil lamp sits near the wall, unlit again, catching the hearth's glow on its curved surface. It looks like a small sun that agreed to stay quiet. You're slightly amused by how comforting that is. Modern life teaches you to fear darkness as lost time, to fear silence as empty. Here, darkness is normal and silence is productive. The lamp exists not to banish night, but to negotiate with it when necessary. As the wool dries and the longhouse returns fully to its settled state, you sense the room's emotional temperature changing into something warmer than relief. A renewed trust. Not the naive kind that assumes nothing ever goes wrong, but the tested kind that says, when things go wrong, we will handle it without tearing one another apart. It feels like cloth being woven back into place. Threads drawn taut again, weft passing through the surface smoothing. Later, the repaired bundle is folded neatly and placed back where it belongs. The cover is weighted, the corner protected, the tie strengthened. The negative space that had looked like a missing tooth is filled again, and the storage corner's pattern returns. You didn't realize how much your own mind had been unsettled by the absence until you see the pattern restored and feel your chest relax. And now, because the night is once again safe enough for play, the riddles return to their softer purpose. You let your gaze drift across the longhouse, across the beam carvings, across the woven cloth hanging nearby. You begin to notice small humorous truths in the world, the kind of gentle sarcasm that fits bedtime. How humans can create a crisis out of something as soft as wool, and how quickly we calm down when we remember we can simply check the reeds. You sip from the clay bowl again, mead warmth, steady and sweet, and feel the earlier tension fully dissolve. You don't feel like a hero. You feel like a person who helped hold a lamp, followed a trail, carried a bundle, and returned it to a place where it could keep someone warm. That is enough. More than enough. In a village built on quiet work, being useful is its own kind of belonging. As the hearth continues its slow, steady glow, you sense that the village is stitching you into its rhythm too. You arrived as an outsider, damp with mist and modern restlessness. Now you sit with smoke in your hair, mead warmth in your chest, lanolin memory on your fingertips, and a new understanding of how peace is made. Not by avoiding problems, but by resolving them gently, and then returning to the work of warmth. The night feels softer again. The longhouse feels whole. And your thoughts, once sharp with alertness, turn back into something like wool, light, warm, ready to settle. With the wool returned and the small crisis dissolved into repair, the longhouse breathes out as a single body. The evening's tension doesn't disappear in a snap. It melts. It melts the way frost melts. Slowly, quietly, leaving everything damp, soft, and calmer than before. You feel it in the way people sit again without hovering, in the way hands resume ordinary tasks without scanning corners first, in the way your own shoulders stay low, as if they've finally learned the village's rule. Don't carry weight that doesn't keep you warm. A meal is shared without noise, not a banquet with spectacle, but a gathering that feels like the natural next step when problems are settled and the body remembers it still needs fuel. The hearth offers its steady heat, and bowls and boards move gently through the room. You notice how food here is always connected to time. Grain has grown, been cut, stored, ground. Meat, when it appears, has been smoked or salted with the serious understanding that spoilage is not an abstract concept. Herbs are dried and saved for when flavor also needs to be medicine. Everything you taste is tied to planning. You eat slowly, not because you're performing mindfulness, but because the longhouse makes rushing feel silly. Food tastes of smoke and grain and the faint bitterness of hard work. Satisfying in a way that doesn't spike and crash. It settles. It becomes part of your warmth. Mead returns too, not as a party, but as a companion to the quiet. A clay bowl warms your palms. The sweetness is still there, but now you can taste the deeper note beneath it. The faint tang of fermentation, the suggestion of yeast and time. You think about how mead is essentially patience made drinkable. Someone made it weeks or months ago and then waited, trusting that invisible change would happen. That trust feels like a theme tonight. Threads twisted and held, fences woven and maintained, wool stored and protected, suspicion avoided by choosing careful reasoning over sharp blame. You glance at the repaired wool corner and feel a private satisfaction that isn't smug. It's more like gratitude that the village's logic stayed kind, that the lamp was used for seeing, not for searching for an enemy, that the basket held scraps and ties and small fixes rather than becoming a symbol of accusation. In the background, the loom stands like a quiet witness to the whole philosophy. Tension is normal. What matters is how you handle it. You start noticing that the village's lesson is never delivered as a lecture. It's delivered as structure. The longhouse itself is a lesson. Walls close enough to hold warmth, rafters high enough to carry smoke away, a hearth positioned where it can serve everyone. The night is a lesson. Work winds down. Food is shared. Tools are put away. Minds drift toward rest with a little playful wondering to keep darkness from turning into fear. Even the path you walked earlier, the boundary markers, the fences, feels like part of the same system. Protect the edges so the center stays gentle. Tidy the small things so the big things don't break. If something goes missing, search with light and patience, not with a voice that burns. You find your eyes resting again on patterns, the weave of cloth, the arrangement of tools, the way bowls are stacked. The riddles aren't pushing themselves forward now. They're simply available like soft toys for the mind. What is stronger than it looks? Cloth. Community. What is sweeter than it should be? Mead. Relief. What keeps you alive without being flashy? Routine. Your mind, which usually wants to turn life into dramatic arcs, begins to accept a quieter truth. Most human survival has always been made of unglamorous repetition, and that repetition can be soothing when it's shared. The longhouse lighting is gentle and low, firelight softened by smoke. Shadows blur into one another. A corner of wool cloth hangs and sways slightly when someone passes, and you find the movement almost mesmerizing. It's like watching grass in wind or reeds by the river. Nothing here is static. It's all shifting in micro movements, reminding you that life continues even when you're tired. At some point, the meal slows into the after-meal quiet, and you feel the room sink deeper into night. People adjust cloaks around shoulders, tuck feet under benches, settle into positions that suggest sleep isn't far. The brass oil lamp remains unlit. The hearth is enough. The village has no interest in making the night brighter than it needs to be. You remember briefly how your modern world tends to fill silence with noise. Music, podcasts, notifications. The panic that silence might mean emptiness. Here, silence is not emptiness. Silence is capacity. It's space for the body to recover, for the mind to loosen its grip, for the community to exist without constantly proving itself. You feel a touching simplicity in that. Not simplistic, simple. A difference that matters. You sit with your bowl, hands warmed, and let the quiet soak into your muscles. You realize, with gentle sarcasm aimed at your former self, that if someone offered you a retreat with expensive branding and a schedule full of mindful activities, you might still be tense. But here, surrounded by wool and smoke and patient craftsmanship, you are actually resting. Your eyelids grow heavier, not collapsing, not struggling, just naturally sinking. The longhouse hums softly with the last movements of the night. The village has handled its small problem. It has fed its people. It has placed its tools back in order. It has made warmth from grain and wool and habit. And in that steady structure, you find a kind of comfort that feels almost like being forgiven, for being tired, for being human, for needing simple things. You let your breathing slow. You let the hearth's rhythm carry you. You let the night become what it was always meant to be. Not an arena to conquer, but a quiet place to settle. The last thought that drifts through you is another riddle, the gentlest one yet. What is the best kind of strength? And as you sink towards sleep, the answer arrives without words. Quiet endurance, shared. Night thins without announcing itself. It doesn't clap or cue a dramatic sunrise. It simply loosens its grip, strand by strand, until the longhouse shadows look less like deep water and more like gentle folds of cloth. You wake the way you have been learning to do here, slowly, letting your breath find its own pace before your thoughts try to sprint. The hearth is low now, not dead, just quiet. Ash lies pale around embers. Smoke is lighter, and the rafters above seem farther away. Wool is everywhere, and it smells of lanolin and wood smoke, with the faint sweetness of last night's mead still lingering like a kindness you don't have to earn. You sit up and feel morning in practical terms. Stiffness in your limbs from benches and packed earth. A warm steadiness in your chest. A mind that feels less sharp in a good way. You stretch gently because here even stretching feels like courtesy. Your eyes drift to the storage corner where the missing bundle once left a clean, worrying gap. The corner is whole again. The cover lies weighted. The wool inside is safe, its dampness handled, its future warmth restored. A sleepy callback rises, reeds holding that bundle like a damp hand. A snap tie trying to impersonate a crime. The brass oil lamp proving that light can resolve more than fear. You let the memory settle, then move on. You step outside. The air meets you with cool clarity after the longhouse's smoke-soft warmth. Dawn is not bright yet. It is silver. The river holds the first light in a thin sheet, rippled and trembling, as if it can't decide whether to reveal the world or keep it covered a little longer. Mist still drifts above the water, but now it looks less like secrecy and more like tenderness. You walk toward the bank and let the ground guide you. The path is damp, grass bending under your steps. Reeds stand in patient rows, each stalk beaded with dew. A bird calls once and then stops, as if it, too, knows that morning doesn't need to shout to be real. Near the riverside work shelter, tools rest where they were left, hung and stacked with careful habit. The splintered plank that caught fresh fibers last night looks harmless now, almost innocent. You pause anyway. This place has trained you to respect the difference between what you see and what you assume. You crouch and touch a reed stalk. Your fingertips come away cool and wet. The river's hush is softer now, less heavy than it was at night, but still constant. It doesn't care that you are leaving. It will keep running long after you go, shaping the bank in slow, unstoppable sentences. You stand and let that steadiness sink into you. Motion without panic, repetition without boredom. Behind you, the village begins to stir. Not an alarm clock frenzy, just small movements. A door shifting, a footstep on packed earth, the gentle clink of a pot being checked. Smoke threads upward again, thinner than last night. Thatch edges catch a first wash of light and look briefly gold, as if the sun is being polite. You turn back toward the longhouse and pass the boundary markers without stopping. Posts, shallow ditches, fences that hold their shape. In the dark, they felt like questions. In the light, they feel like answers. Keep the edges tended so the center stays warm. You spot a fence panel with a tiny irregularity in its weave, that same quiet wink, and you feel a private amusement. Even here, where survival is serious, someone still leaves a playful stitch in the world. At the entrance, the woven reed basket waits. Ready, faithful, unglamorous. It holds repaired cords and scraps that will become something later, because nothing here is thrown away casually. You lift it and feel the slight give of reeds under your grip. Many small fibers woven together carrying what matters. Nearby, the brass oil lamp rests unlit. In daylight, its metal looks warmer, less like a captured sun and more like a calm promise kept in reserve. You don't need it now, and that is the quiet victory. You needed it when darkness made the world ambiguous, when missing wool could have turned into missing trust. Inside, the longhouse wakes in its careful way. The hearth is fed steadily. Wool is touched and covered. No one gives you a farewell speech. This place doesn't require ceremony to make something real. You feel the goodbye in details. The restored storage corner, the repaired ties, the quiet resumption of work, the absence of suspicion where it could have taken root. You take one last slow breath in that warm air, smoke, wool, grain, and let it settle in your chest like a folded cloak. Then you step out again, basket in hand, and turn toward the river path that leads away. The mist continues to lift. The water brightens in strips. Dew on reeds flashes briefly in the growing sun. Your steps keep the village's pace for a while, because your body has learned it. You carry no trophy, just a quieter mind, a steadier breath, and the simple knowledge that warmth is made by repetition, and that problems can be solved without turning people into enemies. The longhouse shrinks behind you, smoke rising like a calm signal, until it becomes one more soft shape in the landscape. The river runs beside you as you go, silver and steady, offering one final riddle without words. How to move forward without rushing, and how to leave without tearing anything loose. You keep walking, and the river keeps pace beside you, steady as a handrail in the dark. The path narrows into damp grass and then widens again where many feet have agreed, over years, that this is the easiest way through. Your boots, real or imagined, pick up a little mud and you let them. Mud is honest, says you were here. The woven reed basket bumps against your leg for a few more steps, and then you stop because you remember what baskets are for in this place. To belong to the work, not to the traveler. You turn back, not far, and set it down where it will be found without searching. Near the longhouse entrance, beside the wall where tools are returned and small repairs begin. You don't make a ceremony of it. You just place it handle on top, as if you're returning a borrowed breath. The basket settles, quiet and satisfied. You glance once at the brass oil lamp resting near the same wall. In daylight, it looks almost modest, a small curve of metal with a practical mouth for flame. Last night, it felt like a private sun. Now it simply waits, patient as ever, and you feel a brief, sleepy gratitude for the way it taught you something without preaching. Light is not drama. Light is clarity. You leave it unlit because the morning has already done its job. You step away again, following the river curve until the village becomes a softer shape behind you. Thatch roofs rounded like hills, smoke rising thin and controlled, fences holding their lines. You don't feel chased out. You feel released, the way a hand releases your shoulder when you finally stop tensing against it. The mist thins further as the sun climbs. Reeds sparkle with dew and then go dull again as droplets fall. The river's surface changes from silver to a muted pewter, then flashes brighter where the current catches light. You watch it with the same attention you watched wool being combed and thread being spun. It's the same lesson expressed in water. Keep moving, but don't rush. Repeat, but don't numb out. Hold tension, but don't snap. A few steps ahead, the boundary markers appear again. Stones, a shallow ditch, a post with carved lines softened by weather. In the night, they felt like questions. In the morning, they feel like a gentle summary. Here is where the village's daily order ends and the wider world begins. Here is where routines stop being shared and become your own responsibility again, which is both sobering and, strangely, freeing. You pause by the post and let your fingers hover near the carving without touching it. You don't need to claim it. You only need to remember it. The mark is simple, but your mind, trained by sleepy riddles, turns it into something personal anyway. What can be small and still hold a boundary? What can be quiet and still protect a center? Behind you, the longhouse is awake now. You can sense it in the way smoke rises a little stronger, in the faint suggestion of movement and work returning. The wool you helped recover is already back to being wool, no longer a story, just a resource drying into usefulness. The idea makes you smile because it's a very Saxon kind of ending. No grand credit, only restored warmth. You keep walking along the riverbank, and the village's sounds fade until only the water remains. Your thoughts, too, begin to quiet, not because you are empty, but because you are full of simple things. Hearth heat remembered in your knees, mead warmth remembered in your chest, lanolin softness remembered on your fingertips, and the steady loom rhythm remembered in your breathing. The modern world tries, for a moment, to creep back in, messages you haven't answered, plans you haven't made, the strange pressure to be productive even when you're exhausted. You let that pressure pass like a ripple. You've just spent a night in a place where productivity is measured in warmth and safety, not in frantic motion. If your mind insists on a to-do list, you give it one that fits the village. Drink water, eat something real, put one thing back where it belongs, and be kinder than your fear. The river bends, and the village disappears behind trees, not as a loss, but as a completed stitch. You carry its thread with you anyway. You carry the reminder that a community survives through small, repeated care. You carry the proof that a missing bundle can be found without turning people into suspects. You carry the image of an unlit lamp and a returned basket, both of them saying the same quiet thing. Prepare, notice, repair, rest. Your steps slow. The ground levels, the air warms slightly, and as the last traces of wood smoke leave your hair, you offer the village a farewell that stays entirely inside your chest, tender, brief, and steady as the river itself. You don't need words. You just keep walking, softened, stitched back together, and ready to sleep with fewer sharp edges. And now, with the village behind you and the river still beside you in memory, you let everything slow down. You imagine the longhouse shrinking, its smoke thinning into the pale sky, its hearth settling into an ember that will be fed again tonight, and again, because that is what care looks like when it refuses to be dramatic. You feel the wool in your mind the way you felt it on your fingertips. Soft, slightly oily, stubbornly warm. You remember the loom's patient rhythm, the way thread becomes cloth only by returning again and again to the same gentle motion. You remember the missing bundle, not as fear, but as proof that even a small mistake can be met with light instead of blame. You remember the brass oil lamp, a quiet little sun that asks for no praise, and the reed basket, faithful and ordinary, holding what needs holding. Let your breathing copy the river now. Inhale, slow and deep, like water gathering itself around stones. Exhale, long and easy, like mist releasing its grip on reeds. There is nothing you need to solve tonight. The riddles can rest. The boundaries can hold. The center can stay warm. If your thoughts try to sprint back to tomorrow, let them do one soft lap and then sit down. Let them fold themselves the way cloth folds, neatly without struggle. Let your shoulders sink, your jaw loosen, your hands unclench. Imagine the hearth's glow behind your ribs, steady and safe. And if you still feel a little exposed, like you're standing at the village edge again, remember what you learned there. Tend the small edges and the big fear stays outside. One calm breath, one simple kindness, one gentle return to rest. You are done for tonight. You can sleep safely. End of story. Sweet dreams.